What's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name's Dyl, and I'm really excited to be back here because Matt has been watching so many films at the Toronto International Film Festival. Go check out his vlogs for all the in-depth coverage there. But TIFF didn't just happen. Since the last time we talked, Telluride finished, Venice completed. There's been a lot of shakeups to the Best Picture race.
I saw 44 movies at TIFF. 45 if you count my rewatch of The Life of Chuck after it won the People's Choice Award. So I have lots of thoughts, and I was surprised making my picture predictions. I have currently seen 8 out of 10 of my predicted nominees, which is awesome at this point. On the other hand, that's a little bit sad because there's very little to look forward to at this point because of that. It's great to have seen all of this, but at the same time, I do wish I left a little something to look forward to. But you have so much to look forward to because having seen some of these films, I think you are going to be blown away by this slate of Oscar contenders.
Yeah, I've currently only seen 2 of my projected 10 for Best Picture, and if we want to go out to my top 20, I've only seen 3, so I'm very excited to see a lot of these films here, whether it's at some local festivals for me, being Philadelphia or Virginia, or just their theatrical releases. I love Oscar season. There's so many great films, and I'm excited to talk about some of their Oscar prospects right here.
Well, let's get into some of those Oscar prospects, because I think I can prophesize exactly how this year is going to go. That might be a little bit crazy to say at this point, but having seen most of what the prospective contenders are, I think that this is really going to shake out to a battle between Anora and The Brutalist, with maybe 2 other films on the edge that could rise up, but I really think it's just Anora and The Brutalist. That is a classic fight. In one corner of the ring, you've got Anora, the crowd-pleasing comedy that has some critical support, will make people cry, will make them laugh, clearly is loved by audiences as well as the critics. Not only does it have the Palme d'Or, it also has one of the People's Choice runner-up places, just like Parasite did back in 2019. It's another crowd pleaser exactly like that. And in the other corner of the ring, you've got The Brutalist, something that critics are going to absolutely fall head over heels for. A film that has been labeled this generation's The Godfather, something that is epic and expansive and feels like the type of movie that hasn't been made since the 1970s. But it's a little bit cold. And what that reminds me of is something like Roma versus Green Book, but better. It also reminds me of Coda versus Power of the Dog. Again, but better, because I think both Anora and The Brutalist are better received than Coda and Power of the Dog. And what we often see in the Oscar race is a battle between something that speaks to audiences and something that speaks to critics, something that people love with their hearts and something that people love with their brains. It's going to be a tight battle, as it often is in these matchups between heart and brain. And I think Brutalist will be a juggernaut that'll win tons of awards. I could see it picking up director, actor, supporting actor. I could see cinematography, production design, and original score. But at the end of the day, I see the preferential ballot favoring a movie that makes people laugh, makes them cry, over one that leaves many people saying, I need to see that again before I really know what to make of it, especially one that's 3.5 hours long. Not every Oscar voter is going to have the time for that. And so they might just gravitate towards something like Anora. A classic thing that we saw with Roma and Power of the Dog was people saying, I respect that movie, but I don't love it. And I think the same thing might happen to The Brutalist this year. But here's how I see the season shaking out at this point. We got the Golden Globes starting the year off. I think The Brutalist will walk away with Golden Globes drama. And then Golden Globes comedy, I think, is going to be a bit of a battle between Anora and Emilia Pérez. And even if Emilia Pérez wins, not the end of the world. It reminds me of Everything Ever All at Once losing the Golden Globe to Banshees of Inisherin. At the Critics' Choice Awards, we should see Anora walk away with this one. If it's something else, I'd be a little worried. Except Brutalist could take this, wouldn't really affect me too much. SAG Ensemble, I think we're getting Emilia Pérez. WGA, we got Anora in original, we got Life of Chuck in adapted, and I think that's going to be the same winners at the Oscars. For DGA, I see Brutalist. For PGA, I see Anora taking it. BAFTA, I see them going Brutalist, and at the end, I see the Oscars going with Anora. And honestly, regardless of what wins between these two, we have a fantastic Oscar season ahead. And to me, that's a welcome change from how disappointed I was last year. Last year, anytime I saw a new contender, I'd go, shit, that was it? That was the movie people are talking about? It was exhausting to me to have people talking about Oppenheimer, Anatomy of a Fall all year long when I just didn't get it. I wasn't on board. And this year, if it really is Anora and it really is The Brutalist, I am a very happy camper, and I will be cheering for both of these movies all year long. Unless Emilia Pérez or Life of Chuck ends up coming out from behind and being the winner, that would be very upsetting to me.
Yeah, I hope I feel the same sentiment as you with Brutalist, with Anora, at least early stuff. I'm like, they're not my most anticipated, but they do sound very good. And I am going to be conceding on the fact that Anora is shaping up to be our Best Picture winner this year. There were a lot of red flags, like the subject matter, its winning package overall, and its narrative. It's remained the buzz all year long, just like you said. With each festival it goes to, it's one of, if not the most buzzy film there. And I mean, its path is really opening up. Original screenplay was always really an automatic win for me, and then now that Saturday Night failed to even place at TIFF, I think that's pretty much locked in stone. Lead actress, everyone seems to be fleeing this category, whether they're going supporting, their film's ass, or both, their film's ass and they're going to supporting. Mikey Madsen, she looks like she's got this one pretty much wrapped up as well. And then you even have the possibility of Best Editing. If Anora is a sweeper all season long, I could see editing possibly coming in with that package overall. And then on the other hand, we have The Brutalist, which I think is kind of a tough film to really crack. There's a lot of things going for this film's favor, including so many people throwing around that massive M-bomb
masterpiece
with this film. But there's a lot of things I think going against it as well. I mean, we have A24. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not. And A24 has never released a 70mm film before. Are they going with every city? By every city, I mean every major city. Or are they just going to keep this New York and LA forever like they did with Sing Sing? And then the domestic market, they hate intermissions. Will A24 be able to pull it off? Because sometimes it's not even the studio's decision. It's the theater. Theaters don't want people leaving in the middle because they can just hop to another theater, or they could just leave or whatever. They're not buying popcorn. They're not doing all this stuff. It's going to be like Zone of Interest, where maybe it struggles with some nominations in the early awards, but once it gets nominated, it's winning a lot of its nominations. Or will it be like Zone of Interest, where maybe they just don't screen it much ahead of time, and then the nominations come out, it kind of underperformed, and then the film just doesn't catch on as much with stuff? Because the reason why Zone of Interest made so much money is the fact that they waited to release it until the nominations. If they put this movie out before nominations, I feel like that could be a world where Brutalist may struggle. But again, it could go both ways. I feel like Brutalist is a top 10 film regardless. No way you look about it. It's got distribution. It's in all of these categories. It's just how many will it get nominations for, and then how many will it win at the end of the day?
This is not going to be an audience movie. Going into nominations, this is going to be the movie that the general public will go, what the hell is The Brutalist? I've never heard of that before. Because if A24 is smart, they're not going to put it out in theaters until nominations are out. But it still has a chance to be the nominations leader, because they'll be giving this infinite guild screenings. They will be showing this to every single person in the industry. They will be pushing this so that this is the industry's most beloved film of the year, something you can't escape if you are in LA, if you are in New York. And then using the Oscar nominations to make it more popular around the country. I disagree with you about intermissions. I don't think we have enough to show for that. I don't think we've seen enough films with intermissions in the modern day to know whether or not theaters will or will not like that. It is such a juggernaut in terms of technicals, in terms of the performances. I don't see any way that A24 doesn't get this in front of the eyes of the people it needs to be in front of, just like they did with Zone of Interest, which, reminder, that performed way better than I think anyone was expecting it to going into that month, because at a certain point it looked like it could be like 3 nominations. It ended up getting adapted screenplay. Yeah, it missed on cinematography, but at the end of the day, I would say it overperformed with nominations, not underperformed. And The Brutalist will perform better. It is more accessible. It is easier to watch. But that said, I do think what I was saying there, where people will say they respect it more than they love it, that'll extend to audiences as well. And a lot of people won't even give it a chance because they'll hear it's a 3.5 hour long movie with an intermission about architecture, and they're going to go, that sounds boring as hell. I'm not watching it. And that attitude will happen to some voters too. And some people might even vote for it that didn't watch it because they don't have the time for that. It's something we see in anonymous ballots every year. Oh, I'm voting for this movie, but I didn't watch it. So we're going to get a lot of that with The Brutalist this year.
A24, as you said, they show each year that it doesn't really matter how the film does theatrically. We talked about this with Sing Sing. It's about how they do their screeners, and if they are hard pushing it, like you said, what they did with Zone of Interest last year, like what they did for Past Lives last year, Brutalist and Sing Sing both will be fine. If they don't really do that as much this year, then maybe those two films start to suffer. And talking about suffering, the first movie I want to talk about is something that a lot of people say they are doing while watching this film. It seems to be the most divisive film of this award season. One thing I can see a lot of years in terms of nominations, in terms of the Oscars, is sometimes these films get a ton of nominations. Look at Maestro, look at Elvis, look at Don't Look Up, look at Mank. These films that have love it and hate it reactions typically do well. This year, Netflix has one of those with Emilia Pérez. We've seen it so far at Cannes. It won not just one, but 2 major prizes. Then it goes to Telluride. It is arguably the buzziest film of that entire festival. Then you go to TIFF, and it's the PCA runner-up number 2, and it's beating films that are supposed to place, that are supposed to win this award, and it's getting there at number 2. Netflix knows what they're doing. They're going to send this to New York Film Festival. This rupturous conversation around the film is going to continue there, and it's going to continue all season long. This film's nomination package is massive. I'm not saying it's going to get all these nominations, but you could look at director. You could look at 3 acting nominations. You could potentially even see a screenplay, which I think is more of a further shot, but then you go to text. You got sound. You got score. You got song, maybe even 2 songs. You got costumes. You got production design. There's so many potential nominations here. Netflix knows what they're doing. When they have a film and they decide this is our number 1, they typically get not all, but most of the nominations they're gunning for, even when the movies are mixed and not very well liked. But Emilia Pérez clearly has people who really, really, really like it. I don't think this really has a shot at picture, but I could see this having 8+ nominations and being top 5 in our Best Picture race this year.
Well, you were saying before, Maestro, Don't Look Up, Mank. I would add in The Power of the Dog even. Netflix has a thing for extremely divisive movies that get a ton of nominations. For Emilia Pérez, its People's Choice Award placement is huge. It shows that people are passionate, and when they like it, they will vote for it. They will go out of their way to show support for the movie. There's no shot at this winning Best Picture, but it has a huge chance of being the nomination leader. Either this or The Brutalist will be the nomination leader. I think both of them could get over 10 nominations. Again, the people who love it, and also the people who hate it, hate it. And you would think that's a bad thing, but I would actually argue that the more passionate negative responses a film gets in opposition to the passionate positive responses, that makes it more likely for the film to get traction, because any publicity is good publicity. If you have a movie that's one of those 10 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 movies, something like Jojo Rabbit, something like Joker, something like Don't Look Up, that is its greatest asset. If people love it or hate it, they are all going to talk about it. When this comes out on Netflix, people are not going to shut the hell up about this on Twitter. It's going to be the movie that you have to watch, because regardless of whether you like it or you hate it, people are going to talk about it so much that you can't miss out. This will be a cultural sensation. I will say, though, the review bombing this is going to get is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen in the Oscar race. This could be the first time ever that we see an Oscar nominee get a sub 5.0 rating on IMDb. People are going to be coming out in force, giving this low ratings. It will be a coordinated effort to review bomb the movie, and beyond that, it's also going to be hated by people who have no bigoted reasons to not like the movie. This is just naturally a movie that's going to get polarizing reactions, which is compounded by the reactions that are going to be gotten from totally bigoted and hateful people. But I do think it will suffer on a preferential ballot for some of those reasons. We've now talked about 2 of the People's Choice Award placers, but we haven't talked about the winner yet, which was Mike Flanagan's The Life of Chuck. Absolutely came out of nowhere. One of the biggest surprises that we've had at TIFF in years. And I want to give a shout out to Arno, and I want to give a shout out to ya boy, who both selected this in the game of Fantasy Filmball. The only two people across all of our leagues that selected The Life of Chuck. And this is a huge shocker. I will say more of a shocker than American Fiction, because while American Fiction had a plot line that hooked me into it as a contender, I never would have expected Mike Flanagan's apocalyptic movie about an accountant to be the type of heartfelt drama that would win over the hearts and minds of the TIFF audience. This one has a heart that I think is going to push it a very long way, but it sort of lacks ambition in its filmmaking style. That was my big issue with the film. It's very plain to look at. It's not doing anything ambitious. It feels very much like a Mike Flanagan TV show. Not very visually exciting, but they are full of great monologues. This is very similar to that. But again, a lack of ambition in the filmmaking style. That didn't stop Coda. That didn't stop Green Book. And it might not stop The Life of Chuck. The maximum that this movie could get is picture, an adapted screenplay win, supporting actor for either Mark Hamill or Chiwetel Ejiofor, and best original score, in which it is win competitive, I would say. It sounds like The Social Network. It has a very distinct vibe to it, as well as a cool drum section. But this is not some awards juggernaut. It is a bigger contender than anyone ever expected. It fills a nice little hole that we had in adapted screenplay after Sing Sing kind of died out, after Conclave wasn't the juggernaut that we expected it to be. This fits in nice and perfectly, and I think it could just walk away with adapted screenplay. But the question I think on everybody's mind for The Life of Chuck, including yours, Dylan, because you have it at number 11, is that this film has no distribution still. It won the People's Choice Award, and they still have not closed a distribution deal. The big question is, who is getting this movie, and are they releasing it this year? That is not a concern in my mind. No matter who gets it, this is a picture nominee, and likely a screenplay winner. It could be anyone. I don't care who gets this. It could be Bleecker Street. It could be Ketchup Entertainment. It could be Searchlight. No matter what, I would still predict the exact same outcome for this. Picture and 2 or 3 other nominations. The buzz coming from a People's Choice Award winner at TIFF is unstoppable momentum. It campaigns itself. Also, the concern that some people have of, oh, what if it's releasing next year? There's not one distributor in the world who would decide to release it next year. Sing Sing, I think the decision to release Sing Sing a year after has poisoned our minds into thinking that distributors will buy something with buzz and hold it rather than releasing it right away. But that doesn't happen on this level. Sing Sing didn't win the People's Choice Award. If it won the People's Choice Award, it would have been released last year. If Life of Chuck had been placing number 2, number 3, sure, we could have seen it held to next year. But with a win, this is getting released by Thanksgiving, and it could be a huge populist alternative to the more artsy, critic-friendly films above it, like Anora, like The Brutalist, and to a certain extent, even Emilia Pérez.
You hit the nail on the head there. My big issue here is the fact there's no distribution yet, but it just comes to the question of, like you said, it won PCA. This was our whole conversation around Saturday Night. If it wins PCA, it's automatically in for Best Picture, and I was like, well, I don't think Saturday Night's winning PCA, blah, blah, blah. That's another discussion. Here, this did win PCA. It won over films that we arguably say are much stronger Oscar contenders on board, like Anora, like Emilia Pérez, like even stuff that didn't place like Conclave or The Brutalist. So now it's like, what can Chuck do? And I think it really does come down to distribution. If it gets a strong distributor like Searchlight, I think it's getting all those nominations that you said. If it gets something a little weaker like Bleecker, maybe it is just picture and screenplay, and that's good enough. But I think it really just comes down to how strong is this movie at the end of the year, because last year when American Fiction won, I feel like at least more people had buzz for it when people first saw, like, oh, this is really good. And Chuck right now has a 66 on Metacritic. That doesn't seem very, very strong, especially when we go into some other contenders out here this year. I guess it comes down to this question. PCA, Chuck won 66 Metacritic. What happens if Saturday Night won, which has a lower Metacritic? Or We Live in Time, which has a lower Metacritic? Or Wild Robot, which has a better one, but has so many other factors going against it? Would those films still automatically be in picture?
Yes.
That's just the question I really want to pose.
Yes, they would be, because the People's Choice Award is a campaigning machine. Immediately, if you win that award, it means that the Oscars look at that and they go, yes, that's a thing. There's such a precedence for the People's Choice Award winner going into the Oscars. And the TIFF audience has such a similar vibe to what the Oscars like. Life of Chuck is not a criticky movie. This is an audience movie. It's going to make people cry. It's going to make them laugh. It having a 66 on Metacritic means nothing because audiences are going to eat it up the same way they did with Green Book, the same way that they did with Belfast. And if it were The Wild Robot or Saturday Night or We Live in Time, those would have been in too, because I stand by the hard, fast rule. TIFF People's Choice Award will equal a Best Picture nomination.
That's very fair, and I guess to, add some spice in here, if TIFF PCA is an auto bid for Best Picture, regardless of studio, regardless of Metacritic, regardless of anything else, I guess I want to pose the question of how does an English language, Sony Pictures Classic backing, early strong Oscar contender winning the Golden Lion not also become an auto bid for a hard lineup of 10? Because if you go all the way back to the expanded era of Best Picture, which is 2009 for the record, every film that already had Oscar buzz, that was already an English language film, and had a major studio backing, went on to a Best Picture nominee. These include Poor Things, Nomadland, Roma, Shape of Water, and even Joker, which didn't even have the Oscar buzz before it had came out, and it went on to win the Lion.
There are 5 examples in the past, 10 years. I mean, you gave all of the examples. Poor Things, Nomadland, Roma, Shape of Water, Joker. Those are the only examples of Golden Lion going to an Oscar Best Picture player, and all of those movies would have got in even without the Golden Lion. Yes, even Joker. Joker surprised people. Without the Golden Lion, it still would have been a thing. I don't think that Golden Lion did anything for any of those movies. To compare that to the People's Choice Award, that has only been wrong one time since 2008. Most of the time, the Golden Lion goes to an art film or an international film, and yes, these American studio movies, they have won it, but that, to me, just says more about what this festival is doing in choosing their juries. But again, a juried prize is not a People's Choice Award. You have 9 people who do not represent the Oscars body. Isabelle Huppert is not an ordinary Oscar voter. And 9 people choosing The Room Next Door means infinitely less than over 10,000 people choosing The Life of Chuck. So to me, I don't think that it's even worth comparing the Golden Lion to the People's Choice Award. The Room Next Door is closer to something like Happening or All the Beauty and the Bloodshed than it is to something like Poor Things or Nomadland or Roma.
I guess what I'm trying to do here is showing how it is a boost, because I think the Golden Lion is very much like the Palme d'Or at Cannes. It's a very small selection of people selecting a movie they think is the best, and it's propelling the film into the Oscar race. And typically with both of these festivals, when an English language film wins with major studio backing, they do go on to the Best Picture nomination in this lineup of a guaranteed 10. But with The Room Next Door, what I'm trying to guess, this big point here, it was a contender before winning the Lion. It was on a lot of pundits' lists above time, even before it was confirmed for 2024. It got good, not great buzz, but it has a 70 on Metacritic. It's better buzz than some other films that are currently out here in the race, and it went on to win a major festival's prize. And I get down in the year of 5 or a not locked year of 10, but in a year of 10 where we've had a lot of big contenders fall flat on their face in this last month, I don't see how this can't really be in the top 10, because Sony Pictures Classic, they get stuff done, just like Netflix. The Father overperformed both with nominations and on awards night. Living, while it was never a Best Picture thing, it was never really projected to be that at the beginning of time, it still got those nominations at almost every single body of actor, of screenplay. And then going with Pedro's last few films that he's worked with Sony Pictures Classic, Parallel Mothers, Pain and Glory, they both overperformed on the day of as well, with score and actress for Parallel Mothers, and then Pain and Glory got into Best Actor and International Feature in a stacked lineup of 2019. And I just think in a year 10, this could be number 10, this could be number 9, but I still think it's in here with Sony Pictures backing, because it does have a package. It has picture, it has lead actress, it has screenplay, it has score. That's 4 nominations. That's good enough in a year of 10.
Even though I do have the film sitting right outside my top 10, I have it at my number 11 slot. There's a lot in this way, and I think when you see the film, you will see why this is not a Best Picture contender. This is a minor Almodovar film. It's not Pain and Glory. It's arguably not even Parallel Mothers, even though I personally like this one better. I want to ask you the question, Dylan. Do you believe that if Pain and Glory and Parallel Mothers were in English, they would have been picture nominees?
If they were in English, would they have won their festival's major prize? I know Pain and Glory won acting at Cannes, so it really comes down to that, because if they would have won their festival prize, Pain and Glory probably won it off because it was going against Parasite, but those other ones, Possibly. It really depends, because I think the major backing here is the added boost of winning the Golden Lion with having a major studio behind you. And then if we want to talk about the welcoming you, it's your time to get in the club. A lot of times when your film breaks in, it's not always your best film. It's not always your biggest film. Pedro's been in the conversation. He hasn't had a chance to shine.
Well,
this is his chance.
He has an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay already.
He does, but he hasn't had a picture nominee.
No, he doesn't. But this is, like, I don't think anyone would say this is even in the top 10 movies that he's made. And that, to me, is a killer. And what I see this as is jury fuckery. This is 9 people that don't represent the Oscars picking something that they just liked the most, or potentially giving someone a prize that they felt was overdue for them. Isabelle Huppert is a good friend of Pedro Almodovar. It is very possible that she gave him the award the same way that she did with Michael Haneke for the White Ribbon back in 2009 at Cannes. Yes, this movie's definitely stronger because of its Golden Lion win. It gives it some more visibility. I think this is a strong contender for an acting nomination, for a screenplay nomination, and for original score. But at the end of the day, there are so many other films that are filling the slot already of what The Room Next Door typically would be. It's an artsy film. It's a little bit colder. I would say that Anora, The Brutalist, Emilia Pérez, and Nickel Boys, and even Sing Sing on a certain level all fill that sort of slot of the criticky contender that The Room Next Door typically would be. Feels like a death sentence for this film in terms of its awards chances. And I just want to throw back to trying to use Venice as a stat last year. Remember when last year you were adamant that Kaylee Spaney would make it in because of the English language Volpe Cup stat, that every single person over the past 20 years who was an English language performer and won the Volpe Cup went on to get an Oscar nomination for Best Actress. That didn't happen. Venice, ultimately, when it parallels with the Oscars, it is a coincidence. It is not a rule. It is not a pipeline. It is something that can be broken because a jury of 9 people does not represent 10,000 people in the Academy.
Going with the jury, again, that goes back to Cannes as well. Could you say, Greta Gerwig going to give her friend of Sean Baker in a film that she likes a lot the extra boost, and that boost has clearly worked throughout the rest of this award season. If Anora didn't win the Palm, would it be the Best Picture potential frontrunner that it is now? That's a question to pose. Some would say yes, some would probably say no, especially if the Palm went to something like Emilia Pérez or something different along those lines. TIFF has some fuckery with it as well. They love to go with world premieres. The only world premiere that got somewhat positive buzz this year was Life of Chuck. If Saturday Night had been a TIFF world premiere, I think it would have won the PCA. That's one of the reasons why I wasn't projecting it to win the PCA. All of these festivals have extra factors that go in, but regardless, the winner eventually goes on to reap the benefits of those awards. And I do admit, the Kaylee Spaney thing last year was a massive L. However, if Poor Things hadn't won the Lion, its actress would have won the Volpe, stat would have continued. The Volpe stat last year broke because the actual winner was ineligible for the award.
To address the world premiere thing with TIFF, I think it's less the world premiere status, and it's more the scheduling of the films. TIFF instituted a rule back in, I believe it was 2014 when they put this rule into place. Films that premiered at Telluride or Venice could not play in the first weekend, and the first weekend is when all the fun is. All the fun of TIFF, the environment of the festival. They shut down a full street, as you might have seen in the videos. Everything is closed down for the first weekend. Monday, it stops feeling like as much of a festival. And so all those conversations you have with people in line, all of those parties, all of that feeling of the festival is gone by Monday. So if a film plays at Telluride or Venice, that means it is not getting a premiere from Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And I think it's not the world premiere status, it's the lack of a first weekend premiere. If Saturday Night played on Saturday night, maybe we would have been talking about it as the winner right now. But it played on a Tuesday night, which is not a good thing. But Anora played on a Sunday night. And being on that Sunday, I think that's why it made the top 3. But let's talk about that movie. Let's talk about the film that I expected to win the People's Choice Award that didn't even place. Saturday Night, Jason Reitman's film. It lost the People's Choice Award. It did not even place. And yet, I still have it coming for a nomination. I know you're going to strongly disagree with that, Dylan. You've been against Saturday Night this whole time. But my argument for it still stands. It is not going to be a top 5 movie as I thought it might be when I was predicting it to win the People's Choice Award. Everything else about my initial expectations for this film stand. This is Oscar catnip in its plot and its themes. It's a movie about show business, about how hard it is to put together a piece of art, to put together a show when everything seems to be going against you. And it's a film that is heavily reliant on cameos and nostalgia. Oscar voters 50 plus are going to instantly see people and things they recognize. They're going to feel a sense of warm comfortability, a sense of nostalgia, and they're going to want to support the movie. Every single person I talked to in line that was 50 plus who had seen Saturday Night was like, that movie made me feel like a kid again. And that's what this movie has in its favor. If you look at the demographics of the Academy, they are going to go out for Saturday Night. It has a crazy marketing campaign potential as well, because all you need to do is have the actors go on Saturday Night Live, have the cast of Saturday Night Live as well, pumping this movie up to audiences and voters. Bring back generations of SNL cast members to do Q&As at industry screenings. This is essentially Avengers Endgame for comedy fans. And I think that this is going to resonate heavily with Academy audiences. Yeah, I might not have loved the film, but I can see the demographic this has. I can see the people that are going to love this. Yes, losing the People's Choice Award was a blow. It's not even slightly win competitive. It is done for in terms of winning screenplay. Instead, I think it's fighting for one of those last spots between 8 to 10. The biggest issue the film has is that it cannot get nominations for actors. No one gets enough time on screen to get a nomination. But I'm still predicting it for picture, for screenplay, for original score, and for editing. I think that this can actually do what Being the Ricardos couldn't do.
I guess my biggest point comes to what you were just talking about there at the end, is the marketing, the advertising. SNL has just the perfect runway to succeed, and it's continually underperforming. At Telluride, the buzz was great from some people. From the majority of people were saying, I'm a little underwhelmed. TIFF, the exact same thing, with the giant marketing push, with the Toronto relations, with all the buzz saying this is a PCA winner, and it failed to place. Most people, including yourself, are coming out of this movie saying it was fun, it's not as good, it's not as great as I want it to be, and that is going to continue for the rest of the season.
I disagree. I don't think I'm representative of the majority on this. Most people I talked to were like, you're crazy. That movie was so much fun. Yeah, it didn't win the People's Choice Award. Like, it could have been number 4. It could have been number 5. People liked this movie. I don't think this has the mixed reception that you're saying for it. Critics definitely were mixed. The Letterboxd score is fine.
But what I was saying all the way back to the start of Saturday Night, this is a Letterboxd. This is a film Twitter core movie. People outside that aren't going to be receptive. It's got a 60 on Metacritic. It's closer to Joker than it is to The Room Next Door right now. And then when you go into the stuff with the promotion of it, if you're going to have Bill Murray, if you're going to have Dan Aykroyd coming out, these people are going to watch the movie and say, the kids on screen aren't them. I'm let down. I got to see Bill Murray. This movie wasn't as funny or as good as Bill Murray typically is. And I just think all the red flags that were here from the start are going to keep coming out until the eventual release. And sure, it will have probably, let's say, 80s Rotten Tomatoes score from audiences. The critics are going to be lower, just like Metacritic. And like, this cast is too young. As you said, there's no one to latch on for an acting prize. I could even go as far to say as this potentially could even miss SAG Ensemble. We always have one movie in SAG Ensemble that's not a Best Picture movie. Right now, it looks like it's this. It looks like it's Piano Lesson. Piano Lesson has big names to latch on to. Who in this cast is SAG going to latch on to besides Willem Dafoe, who has what I heard is like 7 minutes of screen time? Not really anyone very much. And then you have the rest of the things going against this movie. It's not winning original screenplay. I could understand if you're winning original screenplay. If you're winning a screenplay prize, that's all you need to get in Best Picture. Look at Women Talking. If you're not winning that, you need a package. Jason Reitman, he hasn't connected in so long, and this seems to be another miss with his Ghostbusters Frozen Empire buddy. And Sony has historically sucked at Oscar campaigning. Woman King, the runway was there for the film to succeed. It zeroed. I'm not saying this film's going to zero, but I'm looking at one nomination. Maybe John Baptiste can get in for score, but we've seen he's not a branch favorite. He missed last year for American Symphony.
That was
he didn't make the short list.
There was no reason for him to get a nomination for that, and he did get a nomination in song. Also, we've seen in the past, Grammy sweepers are beloved by the music branch. I mean, that's
in the
how...
song category, though, not in the score category.
But you haven't heard what he does here.
But that's the same argument for Across the Spider-Verse with the best score of the year, and that blanks just because the movie isn't connecting in other categories.
It was also a sequel, and it was a Spider-Man movie, and this is... I think you're thinking about this movie wrong, Dylan. You keep saying this is a Letterboxd movie, this is a Film Twitter movie. It's not. This is a movie that is made for the 50-plus crowd. We've even had comments on the channel, people saying, I'm over 50 and I'm looking forward to Saturday night because I grew up with that show. I grew up watching it. That's who this movie's for. The movie's not for people like me that watched Saturday Night Live like 5 or 6 years ago. The movie's for people that have been watching it since the very beginning, that grew up with the excitement of the promise of a counterculture comedy movement. That's who the movie's for. This is not a Film Twitter movie. It doesn't need a good Letterboxd score. It doesn't need good critic support. What it needs is the industry to come out for it.
And like I've been saying, I just don't think the industry is going to come out because they may be excited, but they're eventually going to be let down by the final product.
I don't think they will be.
I just don't see the backing for it. I know the next film I'm going to talk about is the complete opposite for it, where it has all the negative reception, but it at least has a package. This film doesn't have a package, and I don't think it's going to have the industry support. BAFTA won't give a shit about it. I don't think Critics' Choice is going to go for it. SAG could even skip out it, and then what's it going to have? Golden Globe comedy nomination.
It's going to have Globes. It's going to have Critics' Choice because Critics' Choice just does whatever they expect.
But Globes what? Globes comedy musical picture nomination and nothing else.
Picture, actor, which it could win, because who else is up against Gabriel LaBelle in that category? Joaquin Phoenix? You fucking kidding me? Not at this point. It has a potential screenplay nomination there. It's got a score. That's 4 nominations at the Golden Globes max. Could get 3, but there's that. There is Critics' Choice Award, which again, they will probably just give it a few nominations. It'll get guilds. Look at this for the Art Directors Guild. Look at it for Costume Directors Guild. Look at it for the Editing Awards. That is its package. I just see this being something that the industry will connect with more than everyone else. The same way that a few years ago, being the Ricardos, we were like, that's not a thing at all when the reviews came out for it. And then it just kept picking up weird nominations all over the place. And at the end of the day, that was number 11.
You can make the case for being number 11, but again, what Being the Ricardos succeeded in was the big names. Who's the big names of SNL? It doesn't have any of those.
Yeah, it's Being the Ricardos without acting, but with stronger technical support. I think the thing with Being the Ricardos is people watched that and they said it didn't feel like I Love Lucy. It didn't capture I Love Lucy, but I liked the actors. Everyone, literally everyone, even me, who wasn't a huge fan of the movie, feels like this captures the essence of Saturday Night Live.
We'll just have to see when the movie comes out next month. I still have it in for original screenplay, but again, as I've been saying all year, I just don't see this going anywhere else. And for Globe Comedy Musical, I think there's at least 3 people you could probably put above Gabriel LaBelle for winning. But we'll get to that when we have our Globe thing. I think Joaquin Phoenix is above him. I think that Jesse Plemons is above him for Kinds of Kindness.
What?
Because again, Globes are international based now. They're not going to go for the American heavy movie. That is why we saw Everything Everywhere lose to Banshees. That is why we saw Poor Things steamroll last year. They love the international appeal movies, and Kinds of Kindness is that. I'm not saying he's going to win, but Joker, let's get into this. Joker, Folie, duh. It's more. Hear me out. The international critics are still here supporting this film. If you go online, those are the ones who are giving the more positive reactions to this film. And just like the first one, domestic audiences, domestic critics, they have the knives out here. Look abroad, they are supporting it a little bit more. Like the acting, sure, Joaquin Phoenix, you can move him out. Who I do see coming along to show support in the acting branch for this movie is Lady Gaga, and supporting. Most people who have seen the film already at the Venice Film Festival point to her as being the standout of this film. What made the first Joker so successful is support from across the Academy, directing, acting, screenplay, as well as tech and crafts. I don't think screenplay comes back this time. I don't think directing comes back this time. I still think this film is very strong in the technical and craft works because this film is Warner Brothers number 2. Even if this film does end up missing Best Picture, you can compare it to something like Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which still got 5, 6 nominations, including in acting. It was arguably probably number 11, 12, 13, 14 that year, and the main reason for it missing was because we already had other bigger sequels in the lineup, such as Avatar: The Way of Water, Top Gun: Maverick. I've seen people out there try to say Gladiator 2, this is your route to succeed, but if you really think Gladiator 2 is be more appealing than Joker, I just think that's kind of crazy. This film is divisive. This film was always going to be divisive, and I think it's only going to continue, as we talked about with Emilia Pérez, not as strongly, but it's going to continue to propel this film throughout awards season, and I think this is a film that the industry is going to back. PGA nomination, and then I think that the BAFTAs will support this film. I think the Golden Globes are going to support this film with at least 3, if not 4 nominations, and then we can continue in with the Oscars at the end of the day. This is no longer a top 5 contender. This is like what you're saying for Saturday Night Live, an 8, 9, 10, 11 type contender, and as long as this film just does not go into the red, I just don't see how Joker's going to completely fall out of the race.
So those international critics who are supporting this film, are they in the room with us right now, Dylan?
Yes. You go to the Metacritic, the people who are giving it 80s are the international critic support. When you go to Venice, the people who are there who are reporting on the film are saying people are talking about Joker. It is in the room. It is having the conversations. Yes, it did not win the Lion again. It's never going to win the Lion. We both said here, it's not going to happen. We said it as jokes. The biggest thing that going against this film is no longer Lady Gaga's in lead. She's now in supporting. That throws the Volpe out. And then what other award are they really going to give Joker? There's nothing else to give it. So it not getting an award doesn't really matter to me. I think this film is still going to hit the zeitgeist because it's going to be divisive. There's going to be the people who love it. There's going to be people who hate it. And in a year of 10, that's all you need when you're getting these nominations.
Unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing, though. This doesn't have what Emilia Pérez has, which is the 10 or 3, where people either love it or hate it. People like it. Those international critics that you say are supporting it, they gave it an 8 out of 10. If you look at the first film, which had a similar score on Metacritic, it was high 50s, this is mid 50s. That one had like 7 or 8 people on Metacritic giving it 100 out of 100. Yes, it had those 30s, but you need those 100s. The biggest thing to be worried about with Joker is that it doesn't have the people who love it, who are head over heels for it. You need that with a divisive movie. This has people who like it, and it has people who hate it. But the people who like it, they're not going to fight for it. They're not going to fight for it the way that they would if they loved it, the way that they would for Emilia Pérez. Unfortunately, I just don't see the passion for this one. And when audiences get to it, I think that's going to be the make or break for it. If audiences outside of Venice are more kind to this film, if this can be a word-of-mouth hit, then sure, yeah, it's in the Oscar race still. I still have it floating outside of my top 10. It's pretty close for me. But the big thing in its way is this going to be actually liked by audiences, or is this going to fall off a cliff after the first weekend? It is not tracking well for box office right now. You probably know more about that than I do. I don't watch the box office numbers. How is this tracking? Because I've heard it's bad. It's
currently in the 60 to 70 range, but to keep in mind, the first Joker was not tracking very well. It had insane first week walk-ups because of the discussion around the film. Obviously, Folie does not have the insane discussion yet, but I feel like the Warner Brothers marketing team is getting ahead of that by having the early screenings in 70mm. They're getting the diehards out there. They're going to talk about the film, whether it's glowing, whether it's a train wreck. I feel like the discussion is going to happen here, and just like the first film, it's going to have great walk-ups on the first week, because the first one was tracking around 70 to 80 opening week and then overperformed by 20 million. I think what happens is like what you're saying here. Does the audience respond? If they don't respond, this is something like Wakanda Forever, where it is grabbing 3, 4 tech nominations and the potential for an acting. Or if the audience does respond, I think it's that number 8, that number 9 movie, that movie that's just too big to fail that we see every year. The Oscars are populous. They have at least 2, if not 3, massive box office films each year. This year, we have Dune, maybe a complete unknown as the other one. Joker seems much more likely for that.
But I don't think this is going to be a box office hit. I mean, this should already have better word of mouth. This should be tracking better than the first one was, because the first one, like you said, was a word of mouth sensation that people grew and grew on the film. If this is tracking lower than the first film, if the first film was tracking for 70 to 80 million and then outperformed that, this should be in the numbers where it landed, not lower than it was tracking to open at first. And you mentioned the diehards that are going to come out to those early IMAX 70mm screenings. Those are people who are not going to go and see it on opening weekend. And they're not going to be people who are going to be recommending the film to their friends. This is alienating the fans. It is not going to perform well with people outside of the fan base, and the fan base that wants to see it will see it first weekend and never again. This is not going to be Wakanda Forever. Wakanda Forever might not have been as beloved as the first one, but it was still liked. Joker Folie à Deux has a very real potential of being like the Matrix Resurrections of this year, where audiences just hate this movie. Hate hate it.
I still think this one can still survive in a season, as we've talked about before, where a lot of expected contenders are dropping. Obviously, we have new ones like The Life of Chuck, which again on its own right has those mixed early critical receptions. We'll have to see. Like you said, you say it seems more like an audience favorite. We'll see when it comes out, and most likely will be, but that's untested until those opening numbers come out, just like Hero Joker. But as I know, that was my divisive take of the episode. We've each had some. We want to hear your divisive takes down below, because that is the fun of the part of the season that we're at now. Fest are over. Almost every movie has been seen, because what are some of the other major contenders yet to be seen yet?
Gladiator, Blitz, Complete Unknown. You would say Nosferatu. I would say that's not a contender, so Juror number 2, I guess, is one that has entered into the Oscar race. It's not a contender, but womp womp. Maybe Wicked? I don't know. Could Wicked be a thing now? I'd say no.
I feel like Wicked, I feel like Nosferatu, those are two films that could appeal tech-wise, above the line, maybe not so much. I guess you could kind of throw here, if we're considering Juror number 2, those AFI premieres could be something or could be nothing.
Blitz is the big one that could be the massive missing puzzle piece to this year's Oscar race, or it could just be nothing. I'm still leaning towards it being nothing, but there's definitely potential for it to totally upset what we think is happening right now.
Well, I'm excited to actually see a movie before you for a change at a festival, because I will be seeing Blitz Day 2 at the London Film Festival along with Emilia Pérez, so definitely subscribe for thoughts on Blitz. It's not the first screening, but it's the second screening.
That's exciting. Dude, you're going to have a great time. Anyways, that brings us to the end of this video. So much to talk about this week, and the talking will continue. This is an all year long Yap Fest on this channel, and we will be back again next week, yapping your ears off about the acting categories now that we've seen more of these movies. But as always, thank you so much for watching. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.